You found your way to Whispers of Crimes, a quiet corner where the shadows of the past are gently told. Here, we speak of real crimes and mysteries, not to shock or scare, but to wonder, to reflect, and maybe to help you fall asleep. So close your eyes, let your thoughts slow down, and come with me into tonight's case. Gitchie Manitou State Preserve was supposed to be a quiet escape for 5 teenagers in 1973, but that November night turned into something far darker. Gunshots shattered the silence. 4 teens were hunted down and executed in cold blood. The lone survivor? A 13-year-old girl kidnapped, assaulted, and held hostage by the killers who pretended to be cops. What really happened in the woods? Who were the brothers behind this terrifying ambush? And how did one young girl help bring them to justice? This is the story of the Gitchie Manitou murders, a night of horror that still echoes through the trees. Chapter 1: Innocence in the Preserve, on the evening of Saturday, November 17th, 1973. 5 teenagers from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, made their way to Gitchie Manitou State Preserve, a serene and often overlooked natural area in northwest Iowa, just across the border. The group: Roger Essam, 17, Stuart Bod, 18, Dana Bod, 14, Michael Hadrith, 15, and Sandra Chesky, only 13, had planned a quiet night in nature, away from the pressures of school and the watchful eyes of their families. Gitchie Manitou, a preserve known for its billion-year-old Sioux quartzite outcroppings, had long been a place for young people to hang out, party, and experience a sense of freedom. With little oversight, it offered isolation and calm. The teens drove to the park in 2 vehicles, Roger Essam's Ford station wagon and Michael Hadrath's red van. Their plan was simple: sit around a campfire, talk, play guitar, and maybe smoke a little marijuana. It was a cool night. The fire crackled as the group settled in. There was laughter and music, and everything felt safe. Sandra, though younger than the others, was dating Michael and fit easily into the group's relaxed atmosphere. None of them could have predicted what was lurking just beyond the tree line, watching, waiting. What they didn't know was that 3 brothers, Alan, David, and James Fryer, were also at Gitchie Manitou that night. The Fryers, all from the nearby Sioux Falls area, had criminal records and were known to law enforcement. They were armed with shotguns and a .22 caliber rifle, and they had decided to go hunting not for animals, but for victims. Chapter 2: The Night Turns Deadly. As the teens sat by the fire, the Fryer brothers crept through the darkness, armed and high on drugs. They later claimed they were out hunting deer and had stumbled upon the teens, but their actions suggested something far more sinister. They observed the group from the woods, watching and plotting. According to later testimony, the brothers became enraged when they believed the teens were smoking marijuana and devised a plan to impersonate narcotics officers as a ruse. Suddenly, a gunshot tore through the air. Roger Essam was hit first shot in the arm and then again fatally as he tried to flee. Chaos erupted. The teens screamed and scrambled, but before they could process what was happening, the Fryers descended on them, yelling that they were police and that the kids were under arrest. Dana Bod and Stuart Bod were pulled away from the group under the guise of interrogation. They were marched into the trees and executed. Dana, just 14 years old, was shot point blank with a shotgun. Stuart was gunned down moments later. Meanwhile, Sandra Chesky and Michael Hadrith were forced into Michael's van. The Fryers claimed they needed to transport them for further questioning. Hadrith begged them to let Sandra go. Instead, the brothers stopped the van, took Michael out, and murdered him with a shotgun blast. Now, only Sandra remained. Terrified, she was told she would be taken in for questioning, and if she cooperated, she would be allowed to go home. She didn't yet realize she had become a hostage in a deadly game of control and terror. Chapter 3: The Captive. The Fryer brothers brought Sandra to a farmhouse outside of Hartford, South Dakota, a rural property where Alan Fryer sometimes stayed. There, over the next 36 hours, Sandra was kept prisoner, psychologically manipulated, and subjected to repeated sexual assaults, primarily by Alan Fryer. Alan, the oldest of the three, was 29 at the time. He told Sandra he was a narcotics officer and that he had saved her from the fate of her friends. In his twisted mind, he believed she was now his girlfriend. He alternated between threatening her and treating her as a companion. Police responded quickly. At first, Sandra's story seemed incredible. How could a 13-year-old girl survive such an ordeal and remember so much? But her details checked out. She identified the Fryer brothers by name. She knew about the murder locations. Her story was real and horrifying. Chapter 4: The Manhunt and Arrest. Once law enforcement verified Sandra's information, a multi-agency investigation was launched. Officers from South Dakota and Iowa began tracking down the Fryer brothers. Within days, all three were arrested without incident. They were charged with a staggering list of crimes: 4 counts of first-degree murder, kidnapping, rape, and conspiracy. Investigators recovered evidence from the farmhouse, corroborating Sandra's story items that belonged to the murdered teens, weapons matching the ballistics from the crime scene, and traces of Sandra's clothing. Bullet casings and blood spatter at Gitchie Manitou matched those found in the Fryers' possession. Autopsies confirmed that Roger Essam, Stuart Danabod, and Michael Hadrith had all died from close-range shotgun wounds. None of them had a chance to defend themselves. Their bodies were found scattered across the preserve in separate locations, indicating a coordinated and deliberate execution. The public was shocked. 4 teenagers brutally murdered. A 13-year-old girl raped and kidnapped. The idea that the killers had pretended to be police officers made it all the more grotesque. Iowa and South Dakota residents demanded justice. But justice would come in stages. Chapter 5: Trials and Testimony. In 1974, Alan Fryer stood trial first. Prosecutors, aided by Sandra Chesky's testimony, presented overwhelming evidence. Sandra, now 14, was composed and detailed on the witness stand. She recounted the murders, her captivity, and the brothers' behavior in chilling detail. The defense tried to paint Sandra as unreliable due to her age, but the jury wasn't swayed. Alan was convicted of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and rape. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Next came the trials of David and James Fryer. Like Alan, both were convicted and received life sentences. Each brother tried to minimize their role in the murders, blaming one another, but Sandra's consistent, meticulous testimony cut through the noise. She identified each of them as present and involved. Her courtroom presence was both brave and haunting. The verdicts brought relief to the victims' families, but no celebration. The murders had left a deep scar on the community. The loss of 4 young lives and the destruction of Sandra's childhood would never be forgotten. Chapter 6: Echoes of Trauma. After the trials, Sandra attempted to move on with her life, but the trauma never truly faded. For decades, she lived largely out of the public eye. She dealt with the pain privately, though the burden was immense. Being labeled a survivor in such a high-profile case brought both unwanted attention and misunderstanding. In later interviews, Sandra explained that she often felt judged, not just by strangers, but by those who wondered why she had survived. Some asked why she hadn't done more. Others questioned her decisions. It was an unfair burden to place on someone who had done nothing but endure the unendurable. Gitchie Manitou itself became a place of legend, a once tranquil park now associated with bloodshed. For many years, the site saw fewer visitors. Even those who did return often described a heavy, eerie silence that hung over the preserve. The Fryer brothers remained in prison. Over the decades, they filed appeals, requested retrials, and occasionally spoke with the media. None were successful in gaining release or reducing their sentences. As of 2025, all three remain incarcerated in separate facilities. Chapter 7. The Lasting Legacy. The Gitchie Manitou murders remain one of the most haunting crimes in Midwestern history. The brutal execution of 4 teenagers, the abduction and abuse of a 13-year-old girl, and the terrifying impersonation of law enforcement combined to create a uniquely horrific case. What sets the tragedy apart is the survival of Sandra Chesky. Her memory, her bravery, and her testimony ensured that justice was not just sought, but achieved. Without her, the Fryers might never have been caught. Her courage brought closure not only to the families of the victims, but to a region devastated by the senselessness of the crime. Over the years, Sandra has participated in documentaries and crime series to tell her story in her own words. She does so not to relive the trauma, but to honor her friends and to remind the world that evil can be survived and even confronted when truth is spoken boldly. Though nearly 50 years have passed, the murders at Gitchie Manitou remain a dark chapter etched into the soil of Iowa's oldest preserve. The trees have grown. That's all for tonight's story. Another thread in the web of true crime, quietly unraveling as the night goes on. If you're still with me, thanks for listening. And if sleep has already taken you, may your dreams be peaceful and your mind at ease. I'll be here next time by the fire with another story waiting to be told. Good night, and don't forget to lock your doors.